a story about a family that apparently experienced some carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide comes from unburned gases. Usually it comes from unburned natural gas in the home. It could come from unburned propane. It could come from your car. You can get carbon monoxide poisoning from your car. And we've heard of people taking their lives by closing themselves up in a garage and breathing that. So it is potentially lethal. And this family out in Provo apparently got poisoned from carbon monoxide. And they had a young child, 5 days old, very young child, and they started experiencing these symptoms. And one of the symptoms is sleepiness. And they didn't know what was going on, and they felt nauseous. And so they did a little research on the internet, and they found that carbon monoxide poisoning could be one of the things that was going on. And so apparently they got themselves in to get checked out, the emergency room, I believe, and they were diagnosed with carbon monoxide poisoning, much to their surprise. And as it turns out, the poisoning was from what looks to be a defective heater. There's really no discussion in the story about the defective heater, but that's what they reasoned the poisoning came from. And the story is about a bill. Again, we're talking about the legislative session, and apparently there is a law on the books in Utah that forbids cities from enacting carbon monoxide requirements for landlords. In other words, the city is saying, we're not going to tell you, landlords, that you need to have a carbon monoxide test or tester in the units in the houses that you rent out. That's up to you. If you want to do that, that's up to you. We're not going to require you to do that. And apparently Utah is the only state in the union that has this prohibition against requiring landlords to have CO detectors in the home. And I think it's crazy. These CO detectors, I checked online, $19.95 on Amazon, $20 in Walmart, Home Depot. They are not expensive at all. And what is the harm to buying one of these things and installing it where you have a potential carbon monoxide source, such as a heater? And there's a picture in the story about looks like it's a wall heater that apparently malfunctioned and was putting out the carbon monoxide. Especially for older equipment, maybe equipment like wall heaters, I think it's just critical for apartments, these rental units, to have the carbon monoxide detectors. Now, should the residents have them if their landlords don't provide them? Absolutely. Again, $20. I mean, that's nothing for peace of mind in your home. It costs about the same as a smoke alarm, which most apartments have. I think there is actually laws in most cities that require apartment units to have smoke detectors. So why not have a carbon monoxide tester as well, just for that peace of mind? I know that our family's had a carbon monoxide tester for years, probably 10 to 15 years. We've had one, and for the most part, it just sits there. It's plugged into the hall. It just sits there and does nothing, and it has a test switch, so you can test it to see if it's actually working. And so, on a regular basis, and the plumber came by the other day and he says, conference, that's when you should do your testing. So in April and in October, you change your filters, and you can test your smoke alarms, change the batteries in your smoke alarms, do all that basic safety stuff, maintenance stuff in those 2 months. And I thought that's a great idea to make it a regular part of what we do. Maybe service the batteries in those devices, smoke alarm and CO detectors, just to make sure they're working. If there's a test switch, certainly hit the test switch and make sure that's working. Smoke alarms and the CO detectors, those alarms are pretty loud, and so you better maybe get some earplugs as well. But you want to make sure that they are working. And so, in this case, as I looked at it, and I agree that this law should be repealed. It's crazy to say that cities should not require landlords to have these CO detectors in their units. It's a matter of public safety that they actually make that requirement for landlords to do that. Sometimes we don't want too much government in our lives, though. I get that, and I agree as well. But I think when it comes to issues of public safety, sometimes we need to have some basic laws that just give these landlords and other people a kick in the pants to make sure they're doing the right things. If motorists, for example, were not held responsible when they ran a red light, why would people stop at red lights? Certainly laws on the books help spur people to do the right thing, help them to be more safe. And in this case, this landlord apparently had a defective heater. And so is there a claim against this landlord? Well, potentially. How often should this heater be inspected? And if there's no CO detector, when does it ever get checked? When's the last time that this thing was maintained? Is the landlord checking this thing every year? I mean, those are questions that I would have to find out if this furnace was repaired, or not repaired, but maintained properly, so it was safe for the people in that apartment. Now, apparently, the Utah Apartment Association was against changing the bill, and that makes sense. They want to reduce the cost for the landlords. They want to reduce the liability. And to me, liability is a big thing, because if the landlord's going to say, well, we're not supposed to put CO detectors, there's no law that says we have to, then the landlords can point to this law that says that they are not required to provide CO detectors, and they could sort of wash their hands of being responsible if there is an accident in that home and people are poisoned with carbon monoxide. So I think that's a little weaselly on that part of that association. And apparently there's some compromise that is going to, they say, split the liability, they say, between the resident and the landlord if something like that happens. But for me, I think on both ends there needs to be a detector. If the landlord's not providing it, then certainly the resident should be putting it in there. I think it's like buckling your safety belt, your kid's safety belt, your family's making sure everyone in your car has their safety belt on. It's just something that you should do to keep everyone safe in your home.